The eternal dawn groaned like a dying beast as another wave of Vex bioplasma struck its hull. The massive Coalition flagship, once the pride of 17 allied worlds, now drifted through space like a broken toy. Admiral Velthar's claws dug into the metallic armrests of his command chair as he watched his fleet crumble around him. "Shields at 12% and falling, sir," shouted Lieutenant Commander Zixtal from the engineering station. His blue-scaled hands danced across holographic controls, trying desperately to reroute power from non-essential systems. "We can't take another hit like that." Through the massive viewport, Velthar could see the nightmare that had consumed 3 star systems in just 2 months. The Vex weren't like any enemy the galaxy had faced before. They moved like a living ocean of chitin and rage, their bioships pulsing with organic energy as they tore through Coalition defenses. Each vessel looked like a giant insect crossed with a warship, their hulls covered in spikes and weapon pods that seemed to breathe. "Sir, the Harmony's Light is requesting immediate evacuation," reported Communications Officer Terlin, her usually calm voice cracking with stress. "They've lost life support on decks 4 through 7. Velthar closed his eyes for a moment. The Harmony's Light carried 15,000 souls from the aquatic Mertai homeworld. Good people, peaceful people who had joined the Coalition to explore the stars, not to die in this senseless war. "Tell them to head for the emergency jump point," he ordered. "We'll cover their retreat." But even as he spoke the words, Velthar knew it was hopeless. The Vex had learned to predict their tactics within hours of first contact. Their hive mind processed every battle, every strategy, every weapon the Coalition threw at them. What made it worse was how they adapted. Coalition energy, weapons that had once carved through enemy hulls, now barely left scorch marks on Vex armor. The creatures' exoskeletons shifted and evolved in real time, becoming immune to whatever hurt them. "Admiral, we're receiving priority transmission from Antari's defense grid," announced Terlin. Her face went pale as she listened to her earpiece. "Sir, they're gone, the entire grid. 17 orbital platforms gone in under an hour." The bridge fell silent, except for the distant sounds of emergency klaxons echoing through the ship's corridors. Antares had been their strongest defensive position, protected by energy shields that could stop a supernova. If the Vex had broken, through there nowhere was safe. Velthar's tactical display showed the grim reality. Red dots representing Vex forces outnumbered blue Coalition markers by 50 to 1. Entire sectors that had been green just days ago now showed as contested or lost. The evacuation fleet from Kepler Prime had gone silent 12 hours ago. The mining colonies in the Outer Rim weren't even answering their communications anymore. "Sir, should we begin evacuation procedures?" asked his first officer, Commander Haxtel. The normally confident Soran looked defeated, his reptilian features drawn with exhaustion. "Not yet," Velthar replied, though his heart wasn't in it. "We still have civilian transports to protect." As if summoned by his words, another group of refugee ships appeared on the scanner. Families fleeing from the recently fallen Proxima station, their small vessels packed beyond safe capacity with survivors. Children, elderly, wounded soldiers, all counting on the Coalition fleet to get them to safety. "Incoming Vex dreadnought, bearing 27 Mark IV, called out the tactical officer. "It's massive, sir. Twice the size of anything we've seen before." The creature that emerged from the darkness looked like a nightmare made real. Its bio-hull pulsed with veins of green energy, and dozens of smaller attack craft swarmed around. It, like angry hornets, weapon ports opened along its sides, revealing rows of organic cannons that began charging with deadly light. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Velthar commanded. "Protect the civilian transports." But even as his remaining vessels moved to intercept, he knew they were buying minutes at most. The Coalition's finest minds had spent months trying to find a weakness in Vex technology, their most advanced weapons, their most brilliant tactics, their most experienced commanders. None of it mattered against an enemy that could adapt faster than they could innovate. "Sir," whispered Commander Haxtel, "perhaps it's time to consider alternative options." Velthar knew what he meant. Deep in the Coalition database was a contact entry that most officers preferred to ignore. A recently discovered species from a backwater system called Sol, primitive mammals who still used projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Their technology was centuries behind Coalition standards, but their reputation was something else entirely. The humans had only made contact with galactic civilization 18 months ago, but already disturbing reports filtered through diplomatic channels. They were violent, unpredictable, and seemed to actually enjoy combat. Their entertainment consisted of watching other humans fight. Their history was an endless series of wars, and their idea of conflict resolution involved something they called total war. Most Coalition species found them barbaric and unsettling. But as Vex bioplasma tore through another Coalition cruiser, barbaric was starting to look like exactly what they needed. "Send a priority distress signal to Earth," Velthar ordered quietly. Tell them we need their help." His bridge crew exchanged worried glances, but no one argued. They all knew what this meant. They were about to invite the galaxy's most dangerous predators to join the fight. And honestly, that thought scared them almost as much as the Vex did. The void of space rippled as 3 human destroyers materialized above Kepler-7 like ghosts stepping out of darkness. Captain Kim Jin-ho felt the familiar gut punch of hyperspace transition and steadied himself against the command rail of the Defiance. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see the battle raging around the planet's orbital stations. Vex bioships swarmed like angry wasps, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent weapon charges. "Jesus," whispered Ensign Cho Rian from the sensor station. "Look at the size of that fleet." Jinho had to agree. The Vex armada stretched across space like a living carpet of death. Hundreds of bioships, each one the size of a city block, moved with perfect coordination. Their hulls looked like they'd been grown rather than built, covered in ridged armor that seemed to breathe. Weapon pods along their sides opened and closed like hungry mouths, spitting streams of green bioplasma at the retreating Coalition. "Forces? Captain, we're being hailed by Coalition Command," reported Communications Officer Lee Yuna. She paused, listening to her earpiece, then looked up with barely concealed amusement. "They're asking, where's the rest of our fleet?" Around the bridge, the human crew exchanged knowing glances. They'd heard this before. 3 destroyers against an enemy that had crushed 17 Coalition battle groups didn't look like much. On paper, the Defiance, Resolution, and Valor were tough ships, but they were built for speed and precision strikes, not fleet engagements. "Put me through to Admiral Velthar," Jinho ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the reptilian commander's scaled face. Behind him, Jinho could see smoke and sparks on the Coalition flagship's bridge. "Captain Kim," Velthar began, his voice strained with exhaustion, "we appreciate Earth's response, but 3 ships against this armada—" "Admiral," Jinho interrupted. "Politely, with respect, you called us because your way isn't working. How about you let us try ours?" Before Velthar could respond, proximity alarms screamed across both bridges. A massive Vex dreadnought, easily 3 times the size of any human vessel, was breaking away from the main swarm. Its bio-hull rippled with patterns of green and purple, and dozens of smaller attack craft clung to its sides like parasites. "Looks like they want to test the new guys," muttered Lieutenant Commander Park Do-wan from the tactical station. "Target acquired, sir. That ugly mother is heading straight for us." Jinho studied the approaching bioship on his display. It moved with the fluid grace of a hunting predator, weapon ports already glowing with building energy. Coalition vessels had been fleeing from these monsters for months. "Time to show them something different. All ships, combat formation Delta," he ordered. "Signal the Resolution and Valor. It's time to go to work." The 3 human destroyers spread out in a triangular pattern, their angular hulls a stark contrast to the organic curves of the approaching Vex vessel. The alien ship was impressive, Jinho had to admit. Its bio-armor had probably adapted to resist every type of energy weapon the Coalition possessed. Too bad humans had never been big fans of energy weapons. "Magnetic accelerator cannons online," reported Park Do-wan, targeting their central mass. "Fire!" The Defiance bucked as its main guns spoke. Instead of the bright energy beams the Vex had grown accustomed to, solid tungsten slugs shot across space at a significant fraction of light speed. The first rounds struck the Vex dreadnoughts, hull and punched clean through its bio-armor like it was paper. The alien ship actually seemed to stagger in space, green fluid spraying from the impact holes. Its bioluminescent patterns flickered and dimmed as internal systems took damage. The creature had never encountered kinetic weapons before. Its adaptive armor was useless against simple physics. Direct hits across their forward sections, Do-1 reported with satisfaction. Their armor isn't adapting. It can't adapt to momentum. Follow up with the full spread, Jinho ordered. All ships, concentrate fire. The space around the Vex dreadnought lit up with muzzle flashes as all three human vessels opened fire. Railgun rounds, magnetic accelerator shells, and old-fashioned explosive missiles created a devastating barrage. The bioship's hull cracked and split under the assault, unable to evolve fast enough to counter weapons that relied on raw kinetic energy. "Sir, we're getting communication from Lieutenant Park Mina's boarding team," Yuna announced. "They're requesting permission to board that thing." Jinho raised an eyebrow. The Vex ship was wounded but still dangerous, easily large enough to carry thousands of warrior drones. "Tell her the ship is hers. Standard breach protocol." Through the viewport he watched as human assault shuttles launched from the Defiant's hangar bay. The small craft darted between streams of bioplasma, their pilots weaving through defensive fire with reckless skill. Coalition commanders preferred to fight from range, using their ship's superior technology to avoid close combat. Humans had a different philosophy entirely. The lead shuttle, painted with the name Soul Express, slammed into the Vex dreadnoughts hull and immediately began cutting through the bioarmor with plasma torches. Within minutes, Park Mina and her team had carved their way inside the alien vessel. "Borders away," came Mina's voice over the comm, steady and professional despite the chaos around her. "Encountering heavy resistance, but their carapaces don't seem to like our kinetic rounds any more than their ship did." Jinho could hear the distinctive crack of magnetic rifles in the background, along with the chittering screams of Vex warrior drones. The sounds of combat echoed through the communication channel, explosions, shouted orders, and the wet crunch of alien exoskeletons meeting human weapons. "These bugs adapt to energy weapons real quick," Mina continued, her breathing slightly labored. "But they've never seen good old-fashioned bullets before. Their fancy armor can't evolve against a chunk of metal moving at 3,000 meters per second." On the tactical display, Jinho watched as the Vex dreadnought's bioluminescent patterns began to fade and flicker. Internal explosions bloomed along its hull as Mina's team fought their way toward the creature's central nervous system. "Captain," called Ensign Cho from sensors, "the other Vex ships are pulling back. They look confused." Jinho nodded grimly. The hive mind was probably trying to process what had just happened to one of their most powerful vessels. They'd adapted to counter every coalition weapon, every tactic, every strategy, but they'd never encountered an enemy that solved problems by ramming tungsten through their hull at relativistic speeds. "Admiral Velthar," he said, opening the channel to the Coalition flagship, "you wanted to see what 3 human ships could do. Are you watching?" The reptilian admiral stared at his displays in obvious disbelief. One of the most feared Vex dreadnoughts in the sector was dead in space, its bioluminescent patterns dimming to black as Mina's boarding team systematically destroyed its internal organs. "How?" Velthar whispered. "How did you do that?" Jinho smiled, the expression not entirely pleasant. "Admiral, you've been fighting these things with 24th century weapons. Sometimes the best solution is a 21st century approach. We call it keeping it simple." As if to emphasize his point, the Vex dreadnought finally succumbed to its wounds, splitting apart in a shower of organic debris and green fluid. The smaller bioships around it began retreating toward the outer system, their hive mind struggling to adapt to tactics it had never encountered. For the first time in months, the Coalition fleet wasn't running away. Sergeant Lee Do-yun knelt in the rubble of what used to be Coalition Supply Depot Gamma 7, surrounded by a circle of the strangest students he'd ever taught. The Kalari warriors looked like giant centipedes that had learned to walk upright, their multiple arms clicking nervously as they watched him work with what they considered primitive materials. "Okay, pay attention," Do-yun said, holding up a standard emergency ration pack. "What do you see?" "Food," replied War Leader Clixtel, his mandibles clicking in confusion. "Sustenance for biological units." "Wrong. Doyon grinned and pulled out a small detonator. "I see 15 pounds of high-energy carbohydrates that burn real nice when mixed with the right oxidizer." He cracked open the ration pack and began removing components. "Your emergency rations contain concentrated glucose, protein powder, and synthetic vitamins. Mix the glucose with this cleaning solvent from your maintenance kits. Add a simple timer from any broken communicator, and you've got yourself a very effective surprise." The Kalari exchanged nervous glances with their segmented eyes. War leader Clixtal had fought in 17 major battles using energy rifles and plasma cannons. The idea of turning food into weapons went against everything he understood about warfare. "But why not use proper explosives?" asked another Kalari warrior, his translator struggling with the concept. "Because the Vex have seen proper explosives," Do-hyun explained patiently. "They've adapted to your plasma grenades, your photon charges, your quantum disruptors. Their bioarmor learns to resist whatever hurts them, but they've never seen a lunchbox that explodes." To demonstrate, he placed the improvised device in a piece of Vex bioarmor they'd salvaged from yesterday's battle. The organic material had already begun adapting to coalition weapons, growing thicker and developing energy-resistant properties. Do-hyun set a 30-second timer and motioned everyone back. The explosion wasn't particularly large, but it tore through the bioarmor like tissue paper. The organic material hadn't known how to defend against such a simple chemical reaction. "The Vex think in patterns," Do-hyun continued, as the Kalari warriors stared at the smoking remains. "They process information, adapt, overcome. But humans don't think in patterns. We think in chaos. Every time they figure out one trick, we've already moved on to 3 others." Across the ruined depot, he could see other human soldiers teaching similar lessons. Staff Sergeant Kim Junho was showing a group of crystalline Etherians how to turn their harmonic communication crystals into sonic weapons. The Vex relied on bioacoustic coordination, hit them with the right frequency, and their entire local network went haywire. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the battlefield, Corporal Han Sora crouched inside what used to be Coalition Defense Platform 7. The massive structure had been built to withstand orbital bombardments and energy weapon assaults. It had never been designed to be turned into a giant trap. "The beautiful thing about your architecture," Sora explained to the gathered Coalition engineers, "is that you build everything to last. These support beams, these energy conduits, these atmospheric processors, they're all perfectly positioned for what we like to call aggressive renovation." Chief Engineer Mordin, a slug-like gastropod with 12 arms, waved his tentacles in distress. "But these are critical systems. If we damage the structural integrity—" "That's the point," Sora interrupted, attaching a series of small charges to key support beams. "The Vex expect you to defend your positions. They've learned to counter defensive strategies, but they don't expect you to turn your own base into a weapon." She led the engineers to the main control room, where she'd spent the last 6 hours rewiring the platform's systems. The massive structure's artificial gravity generators, atmospheric processors, and energy distribution network had all been connected to a single trigger. "When the Vex swarm comes through that breach point," she explained, pointing to the main entrance, "they'll follow their standard infiltration pattern. They'll spread out to secure key areas, establish communication nodes, and begin adaptive fortification. That's when we hit this button." Mordin studied her modifications with growing horror and admiration. "This will collapse sections 7 through 12, vent the atmosphere from the main corridors, and overload the gravity generators in a cascading feedback loop." "Exactly. And since their bioships are designed to interface with captured structures, the feedback will travel right back to their command vessel. Ever seen what happens when you overload a Vex neural network with contradictory gravity fields?" The gastropod engineer's eye stalks quivered. That's absolutely insane." "That's absolutely human," Sora corrected with a grin. The first test of their new tactics came sooner than expected. Vex scout ships had been probing the system's outer defenses for days, testing coalition responses and adapting to their weapons. But when they encountered the new human-trained forces, everything changed. The attack began normally enough. Vex warrior drones swarmed into the abandoned mining facility on asteroid K-77. Following their standard infiltration protocols, they spread out in perfect formation, their biosensors mapping the structure and identifying defensive positions. What they found instead were dozens of improvised traps that made no tactical sense. Cleaning supplies rigged to create toxic gas clouds, food replicators modified to spray superheated steam, emergency lighting systems converted into strobing weapons that disrupted their optical coordination. The worst part, from the Vex perspective, was that none of it followed any recognizable pattern. Human soldiers had apparently booby-trapped random objects throughout the facility. A door handle that delivered electric shocks, a water fountain that sprayed acid, a gravity plate that suddenly reversed polarity and slammed attackers into the ceiling. Contact report from asteroid K-77, announced Communications Officer Lee Yuna aboard the Defiance. The Vex assault force has retreated. They're calling for reinforcements. Captain Kim Jin-ho nodded with satisfaction. How many casualties? On our side? None. The Kalari forces report they never even had to fire their weapons. The Vex just left. That was the key to understanding human warfare, Jin-ho reflected. Other species fought to win battles. Humans fought to break their enemy's will to fight. And nothing broke a hive mind's confidence like encountering something it couldn't understand or adapt to. The Vex had evolved to process and counter logical military strategies. They could adapt to any weapon, overcome any defense, predict any tactical maneuver. But they couldn't adapt to pure chaotic creativity. Every time they thought they'd figured out human tactics, the humans changed the rules entirely. Within hours, reports flooded in from across the battle zone. Coalition forces trained by human advisors were winning engagements they should have lost, not through superior firepower or better technology, but through sheer unpredictability. The hive mind was experiencing something it had never encountered before: confusion. For the first time in their species' existence, the Vex found themselves facing an enemy that didn't make sense, and that confusion was spreading through their network like a virus, affecting their coordination and decision-making across the entire sector. Humanity had brought something new to the Galactic War, the art of controlled chaos, and the Vex were learning that some things couldn't be adapted to, they could only be feared. Nexus Station hung in space like a dying star, its massive bulk surrounded by the largest Vex fleet anyone had ever seen. The ancient Coalition fortress had been humanity's first real test, a chance to prove their unconventional tactics worked on a galactic scale. Commander Yoon Taik pressed his face against the porthole of the assault shuttle Iron Will and counted. The enemy vessels surrounding their target, 37 bioships, he reported to his squad, including that monster in the center. The creature he referred to was unlike anything the Coalition had encountered before. The Vex hive ship stretched for kilometers, its organic hull pulsing with bioluminescent veins that looked like a circulatory system. Smaller bioships clung to its sides like feeding parasites, and swarms of fighter-sized organisms darted around it in perfect formation. "Sir, that thing's the size of a city," whispered Private Lim Kiwon, his voice tight with nervousness. The young soldier had volunteered for the mission, despite having only 3 months of combat experience. "Good," Tyke replied calmly, checking his magnetic rifle one last time. "Bigger they are, bigger the boom when they go down." The shuttle shuddered as Vex defensive fire bracketed their approach. Pilot Officer Park Heejin threw the craft into a spiraling dive, weaving between streams of bioplasma that could vaporize them in an instant. Through the viewports, they could see other human assault shuttles making similar runs, each one carrying a small team of volunteers. 30 seconds to breach point, Heejin announced over the intercom. "Hope you boys brought enough explosives." Sergeant Onari patted the massive demolition pack strapped to her back and grinned. "Ma'am, we brought enough explosives to crack a moon. This overgrown bug is going to have a very bad day." The plan was simple in the way only human plans could be simple. While Coalition forces engaged the Vex fleet in a massive distraction battle, small teams of human soldiers would board the hive ship and plant charges in its central nervous system. The theory was that destroying the command organism would disrupt the entire local network, causing confusion and hopefully retreat. The reality was that they were flying 12 soldiers into the heart of a ship containing roughly 50,000 Vex warrior drones. Contact in 543. Heejin's countdown was interrupted by a violent impact as the shuttle slammed into the hive ship's hull. Immediately, the craft's plasma cutters began burning through the organic armor, filling the passenger compartment with acrid smoke and the smell of burning flesh. Breach successful. Tyke shouted over the screaming of metal and chitinous armor. Everyone out, let's go. They poured through the burning hole into absolute chaos. The interior of the Vex ship was like stepping inside a living nightmare. The walls pulsed with organic rhythm. Floor surfaces felt spongy underfoot, and everything dripped with some kind of biological fluid. Worse, the air was filled with the chittering sounds of approaching warrior drones. "Contact front!" yelled Corporal Bayek Minje, raising his magnetic rifle as the first wave of Vex soldiers rounded the corner. The alien creatures moved like giant praying mantises crossed with armored beetles, their razor-sharp limbs clicking against the organic floor as they charged. The distinctive crack of human kinetic weapons echoed through the bio-corridors as Tyke's squad opened fire. Unlike the energy weapons the Vex had adapted to counter, magnetic rifles fired simple metal slugs at tremendous velocity. The alien warriors' adaptive armor, evolved to resist plasma and particle beams, offered no protection against old-fashioned bullets. "They're coming from everywhere," Private Lim reported, spinning to engage targets emerging from side passages. The Vex seemed to pour out of the walls themselves, their hive mind directing reinforcements with perfect coordination. "Stay together and keep moving," Tyke ordered, leading them deeper into the ship. "We need to reach the central core before they overwhelm us." The running battle through the Vex hive ship was like something from humanity's worst nightmares. The organic corridors twisted and branched in patterns that hurt to look at, and the constant sound of chittering mandibles echoed from every direction. Worse, the ship itself seemed to be fighting them. Walls suddenly sprouted spikes, floor sections tried to entangle their feet, and acidic fluid began dripping from the ceiling. "Sir, we've lost contact with Team Charlie," reported Onari, monitoring their communications. "Team Bravo is pinned down on level 7. It's just us now." Tyke nodded grimly. They'd known this was a one-way mission when they volunteered. The mathematics were simple: 12 humans against 50,000 aliens in the aliens' own territory. But sometimes mathematics didn't account for human stubbornness. "There." Private Lim pointed ahead to a massive chamber that pulsed with bioluminescent activity. "That has to be it." The central core of the hive ship looked like the inside of a giant brain. Organic neural pathways stretched across the walls, pulsing with information flowing between different parts of the Vex network. In the center, a massive organism that was part computer and part living creature processed data from across the entire fleet. "Holy shit," whispered Corporal Bayek. "It's beautiful and horrible at the same time." The creature seemed to notice their presence, turning what might have been sensory organs in their direction. Immediately, alarms began screaming throughout the ship, and they could hear the thunder of approaching reinforcements. "Nari, how long do you need?" Tyke asked, even as he and his remaining squad members took defensive positions around the chamber. "Give me 3 minutes to place the charges properly," she replied, already unpacking her demolition kit. "These explosives need to be positioned just right to cascade through their neural network." "So you've got it," Tyke promised. Though they both knew 3 minutes was a lifetime in combat, the Vex assault came like a living tsunami. Warrior drones poured into the chamber from every entrance, their adaptive carapaces gleaming with bioluminescent patterns. They moved with the perfect coordination of a hive mind, each creature knowing exactly where its comrades were and what they were doing. But the humans fought with something the Vex couldn't understand or counter: desperation mixed with determination. They knew they weren't going home, so they fought like cornered animals, making every shot count and refusing to give ground. 60 seconds, Nari shouted over the gunfire, attaching explosive charges to key neural junctions. Tyke felt his ammunition counter hit 0 and smoothly drew his sidearm. Around him, his squad was running low on everything except courage. Private. Lim had taken a nasty slash across his arm but kept firing. Corporal Beck had switched to grenades, each explosion buying them precious seconds. 30 seconds! The Vex were almost on top of them now, their razor limbs reaching for human flesh. Tyke could see intelligence in their compound eyes, the cold calculation of creatures that had never known fear or doubt. "Time," Nari announced, her finger hovering over the detonator. "Sir, it's been an honor serving with you." "Likewise, Sergeant," Tyke replied, emptying his pistol into the nearest drone. "All units, this is Commander Yoon. Mission accomplished. Tell them back home that we gave these bugs something to remember us by." He looked at his squad one last time, seeing the same calm acceptance in their faces that he felt in his heart. They'd volunteered knowing the odds, knowing they wouldn't see Earth again, but they'd also known that sometimes the only way to win was to show your enemy that some things were worth dying for. "See you on the other side," Nari said quietly, and pressed the button. The explosion began small, barely more than a flash of light in the central core, but it spread along the organic neural pathways like wildfire, cascading through the hive ship's nervous system in a chain reaction of destruction. The massive creature at the center convulsed, its death screams transmitted through the Vex network to every ship in the fleet. From the Coalition flagship, Eternal Dawn, Admiral Velthar watched in amazement as the enormous hive ship began tearing itself apart from within. Explosions bloomed along its hull as internal systems failed, and the smaller bioships attached to it began drifting away like confused children. But the real shock came when he looked at his tactical display. For the first time since the war began, Vex ships were retreating. The death of their command vessel had sent ripples of confusion through the entire fleet, disrupting their coordination and leaving them vulnerable to Coalition counterattacks. Across the battlefield, human-trained Coalition forces pressed their advantage, using the chaos to drive back an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just hours before. The tide of war had finally turned, bought with the lives of 12 humans who understood that sometimes victory required the ultimate sacrifice. 6 months after the Battle of Nexus Station, Admiral Velthar stood in the observation lounge of his newly rebuilt flagship, Eternal Dawn, watching something that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. Human patrol ships moved through the outer system like pack hunters, systematically tracking down the last scattered Vex bioships that had tried to hide in the asteroid fields. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying. The human vessels moved with a predatory grace that made even battle-hardened Coalition officers nervous. Unlike the methodical search patterns that alien forces would have used, the humans seemed to sense where their prey was hiding, appearing out of nowhere, to deliver devastating kinetic strikes before vanishing back into the void. "Admiral, the human destroyer Retribution reports another kill," announced his communications officer. "That makes 17 Vex stragglers eliminated this week." Velthar nodded, his scaled features thoughtful. The war was officially over. Had been for months now. The great Vex fleets that had terrorized the galaxy were broken, scattered, reduced to small groups of survivors trying desperately to escape human pursuit. But the humans weren't content with mere victory. They hunted with a persistence that chilled the blood of every alien species that witnessed it. The door to the observation lounge hissed open, and Ambassador Cho Minho entered with the quiet confidence that seemed to characterize all human diplomats. The man was small by galactic standards, barely reaching Velthar's shoulder, but he carried himself like someone who represented the most dangerous species in known space. "Ambassador," Velthar greeted him formally, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "My pleasure, Admiral," Minho replied, settling into one of the specially designed human chairs that had been installed throughout the ship. "Though I suspect this isn't a social call." Through the massive viewport, they could see the aftermath of humanity's victory. Coalition construction ships worked alongside human vessels to rebuild the damaged stations and defense platforms. But there was something different about the way the alien crews moved around their human counterparts. A mixture of respect, gratitude, and barely concealed fear. "Your species has earned our eternal gratitude," Velthar began carefully. "The Coalition Senate has authorized me to offer humanity full membership in our alliance, with all the privileges that entails. Access to our most advanced technology, unrestricted trade rights, shared research facilities, diplomatic immunity across 17 systems. We appreciate the gesture, Minho interrupted politely, raising one hand. But we only need one thing. From you. Velthar felt his scales prickle with sudden apprehension. He'd learned to be wary when humans made simple requests. Name it. Maps to Vex space, all of it. Every star system they've ever inhabited. Every colony world. Every breeding ground and hive cluster. We want complete navigation data for their entire territory. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Velthar stared at the human ambassador, feeling a chill run down his spine as he realized what was being requested. The Coalition had fought a defensive war, trying to stop Vex expansion and protect their own worlds. But the humans weren't satisfied with victory. They intended to ensure the Vex could never threaten anyone again. You're talking about a total extermination, Velthar said quietly. Genocide on a galactic scale. Minho's expression didn't change. We're talking about permanent security. The Vex have proven they can't coexist with other species. They don't negotiate, they don't retreat, they don't show mercy. Every world they've touched is now a dead zone. Every species they've encountered is extinct. The only reason we're having this conversation is because we stopped them before they finished the job. Through the viewport, Velthar could see one of the human patrol ships returning from its hunt. The destroyer's hull was scarred with battle, damage, but it moved with the satisfied grace of a predator that had successfully stalked its prey. The ship's weapons ports were still glowing with residual heat from recent firing. The Coalition has access to Vex territorial data from our previous conflicts, Velthar admitted reluctantly. But what you're proposing would take decades. Hundreds of star systems, thousands of worlds. We have time, Minho replied simply. And we have patience. This isn't about revenge, Admiral. This is about making sure our children never have to face what your people faced. The Vex aren't going to suddenly develop peaceful intentions. They're not going to limit themselves to uninhabited worlds. Given time, they'll rebuild and come back stronger than before. As if summoned by their conversation, Velthar's tactical officer approached their table with a data pad. Sir, we're receiving priority communications from across the sector. Coalition Command is requesting clarification on certain personnel transfers. Velthar took the pad and scrolled through the reports, his scaled features growing more troubled with each entry. Officers from every major Coalition species were submitting formal requests to serve under human command. Kalari warriors, Etherian. Technicians, Soran tactical specialists, even gastropod engineers, all asking to be assigned to human vessels or ground units. This is unprecedented, he muttered, looking up at Minho. In the history of the Coalition, we've never seen cross-species transfers on this scale. Minho shrugged. Your people want to learn from winners. Can't blame them for that. But Velthar could see the deeper implications. The aliens weren't just seeking assignment to human units. They were trying to understand human methods, human psychology, human approaches to warfare. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now recognized them as the most effective military force in the galaxy. Your Lieutenant Colonel Kim Tae-hyung has requested permission to establish a joint training facility on Proxima Station. Velthar continued reading. He wants to teach Coalition forces what he calls adaptive combat techniques. My intelligence reports suggest this involves teaching our soldiers to think like humans in battle. That's the idea, Minho confirmed. Your people are good soldiers, Admiral. Disciplined, well-equipped, technically proficient. But you fight like you're following a manual. The Vex adapted to that. They couldn't adapt to chaos, improvisation, and pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Through the observation port, they could see a formation of mixed human and Coalition vessels conducting joint maneuvers. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, executing textbook tactical procedures. The human vessels seemed to barely follow any pattern at all, weaving in and out of the formation in ways that should have caused collisions, but somehow didn't. Your species has changed the entire nature of galactic warfare, Velthar observed. Before humanity, battles were won through superior technology, better tactics, more efficient logistics. Now war is about something else entirely. Minho said simply. War is about will. The will to keep fighting when everything says you should quit. The will to try something insane when conventional wisdom says it's impossible. The will to sacrifice everything for something bigger than yourself. Velthar thought about Commander Yoon Taik and his squad, who had volunteered for a mission they knew was suicide. He thought about the human soldiers who had taught coalition forces to turn their own infrastructure into weapons. He thought about Captain Kim Jin-ho, calmly engaging a Vex dreadnought with 3 destroyers against impossible odds. "The maps you requested," Velthar said finally. "They'll be transmitted to your ships within the hour. Full navigation data for all known Vex territories, including unconfirmed sensor contacts and theoretical expansion vectors. Thank you, Admiral. Your cooperation is appreciated." As Minho prepared to leave, Velthar couldn't resist asking one final question. What happens after? When the Vex are gone, when the galaxy is safe again? What do humans do with all that will? Minho paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. "We explore. We build. We find new challenges. That's what humans do, Admiral. We never stop pushing forward, never stop looking for the next mountain to climb or the next problem to solve. It's what makes us dangerous enemies and valuable allies." After the ambassador left, Velthar remained in the observation lounge, watching. The human ships continue their relentless patrol. The primitive mammals from Sol 3 had become the most feared warriors in known space. Not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through an indomitable spirit that refused to yield even in the face of certain death. The galaxy would never be the same. And somehow, Velthar realized, that was probably for the best. In the depths of space, human vessels continued their hunt, carrying crews that included volunteers from dozens of species, all eager to learn what it meant to fight with human determination. The war was over, but humanity's influence on galactic civilization had only just begun. The Vex had awakened something in the galaxy that had been sleeping for millennia, the understanding that sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to be absolutely, utterly prepared for war. The end.